happy. So as you noted before, our panels are divided up into older adults and then care partners and then health systems. And I completely agree. We should have a fourth. Maybe you'll stay for dinner. We'll have a fourth one of community. And so in this first one, we're lucky to have first Amy Eisenstein, who's the Director of Research and Continuous Quality Improvement at CJE Senior Life, Chicago. She's also an adjunct assistant professor at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So hopefully my presentation too will help talk about some of the community approach. So as Director of Research for a community-based organization, I have a lot of opportunity to actually delve in and work with the community and talk to them and find out what's going on from that perspective. So our organization has been around for about 35 years. We started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do, what we've done with technology, and what our needs are. We started out very much as a storefront place that was built to meet the needs of the population in the community. Our mission has always been to enhance quality of life and facilitate independence of older adults. And it's within our vision that we really strive for innovation. That being the case, though, has always been difficult because we've always kind of started to meet the needs and been trying to play catch-up, so never had the opportunity to step back and look at what the population needs and where they're going. So just a little more about our community. Right now we serve close to 20,000 older adults, family, and caregivers a year. This is a picture of one of our assisted living facilities. That was the first in Illinois and the biggest. I think is still the biggest in Illinois. We also have a dementia care unit. We have 3 adult day service sites. We do community-based programs, including counseling for mental health services. We do Meals on Wheels, consumer assistance. So we really run the gamut of care for older adults. All of our work, too, that we do is based on engagement of our community. So we really work hard to bring together, you can see here, this is a picture of myself meeting with a group of our nursing home residents, as well as a couple clinicians, a couple other researchers, some educators, to talk with our residents to find out what should we be studying, what should we be looking at, how should we be doing this, and why should we be doing this. This program itself is called the Bureau of Sages, and this has been fascinating. Just a really, I think, point that I want to get across is when we started this program, I went around and I looked for clinicians to join me, for researchers. I said, I really think it's important that we look at the voice of nursing home residents and older adults who are confined to their homes, homebound older adults. They prefer to be called stay-at-home elders. And I said, we need to bring this into all of the work that we do. I had clinicians, I had geriatricians say to me, well, nursing home residents can't talk to you. They're not going to be able to tell you what you need to hear. So we've really proven that wrong. And we actually now, we've spoken to over 20 different researchers who are in various stages of their research and been able to provide them substantial and concrete feedback for their research project in terms of what outcomes should they be looking at, how do they want to design some of their interventions, what are ethical ways to work with the community and for the community. The way that we have worked with our stay-at-home elders is through a virtual senior center. This is not something that we created on our own. This is something that was out and available for use. It was created by Self-Help in New York. And this is a program that allows us to get in and talk to those people who are confined at home. The one thing, too, that I want to say is this group who is living at home and living in the nursing home, these are, as Sarah was saying, they're past professions, they're nurse practitioners, they're psychologists, they're coming from a variety of different angles to provide their input and feedback, which is meaningful in so many different ways. Here you could see the nice thing about the Virtual Senior Center is it was designed to be user-friendly. When they turn on their computer, they see this blue screen pop up, and this is what comes up, and this gives them access to everything that they need throughout the course and the curriculum. The first time that I logged into a class, I actually went in to ask them, just to mention the idea, hey, would you be interested in giving me input for my research? Do you want to talk to me about this? Should we do this? The first time I went in there, I clicked join the class. I go in, my camera didn't hook up right from the start. And so I hear voices saying, and your name pops up when you go in, I hear voices saying, Amy, you need to push that yellow button on the bottom left-hand corner. So, it's so user-friendly. They were explaining to me, oh, here it is, that's how I got it. But they were really able to pick it up and access it much easier than I would have expected. And you can see the cool thing too about this program is the green boxes, those are all of the different programs that they have on any given day that they have access to. The other unique thing I think about this program is only 15 people are allowed into a session. So as you can see here, they really are able to see each other's faces and form relationships. So this is, so here you could see too a picture of how we bring in some of our researchers. So we don't have to work in person with researchers who want to come talk to the SAGEs and get their feedback and input. We use technology to help us do that. Some of the quotes that we have, this has given me the opportunity to learn how other people like me deal with things. This has been extremely important for people who are confined to their home, who don't have the opportunity to talk to their peers. Another member said, I think there are many people out there like me who could benefit from this, who are not necessarily going to go and access a video or a reading material, but in talking to a group week after week, you become comfortable with that group and you could accept information and different viewpoints better. Some of the therapists that we've worked with through this program, they have made comments about they actually like working virtually more than in person. If you could see in some of the pictures, you could actually see people's facial expressions. When our counselors are working in support groups, they're kind of at a distance. They're not seeing the facial expressions going on. They're not seeing how what they say and how they respond might impact that person close up. The other thing that we've learned is you see so much what's going on in a person's home, what's going on behind them, what's going on around them. We've had several instances where we've had to follow up with people, and even someone else in the class will call me, Amy, did you see Jan today? She had all of that clutter behind her. I know she's in an electric wheelchair. Can you call and check up on her? So there's just been a lot of community building, a lot of support through this type of work. And so just to pull it together, some of the things that we've learned overall, participants had an easy time using the technology. It was interesting too. I was looking for a picture. This is actually one of our pictures, but I was kind of doing that Google search looking for a picture of older adults using technology. And all of the pictures that came up, the animations, they were all older adults very frustrated. They had a lot of anger and were upset, but that really wasn't the case. It's been a great system for us to use. Yes, there's explaining, yes, there's groundwork, and yes, it's not for everyone, but it's been a huge benefit to the people who have been able to get in and access it. Our participants have gained such meaningful experiences from this work. I was also amazed by how much the nursing home residents and the homebound older adults enjoyed communicating with one another. For the nursing home residents, this is their outlet to the outside world. A lot of them don't get outside. They see their peers as other nursing home residents, which might not be a very appealing peer base for them. It's increased their knowledge. They continue to learn every day. They've made social connections, reducing feelings of loneliness and isolation, which we've heard has great impacts on their health. And it's an activity that they've really enjoyed. So.
I'm sure you have questions for Dr. Eisenstein, but we're going to have a panel at the end, so this is just short talks, and then we'll have the... So Dr. Morrow is professor and chair in Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, which I always thought was Champaign-Urbana, but no, I've just been wrong my whole life. Anyway, thank you for coming, and here's your slides.
Thank you. So today I want to talk a little bit about some work that I've been doing at the University of Illinois taking an interdisciplinary theoretical approach to designing technology for older adults, kind of focusing on health literacy. And then, if there's time, give an illustration or two from some work we've been doing designing computer agents. So I won't spend much time on this. I think we all know that as we age into chronic illness, which imposes a burden in terms of self-care, or demands in terms of self-care, in part because of the responsibility in the healthcare system that has put more emphasis on people's ability to take care of themselves in the home. At the same time, there's pervasive technology changes that increasingly is the standard of care in terms of patient engagement in education. We've learned about mHealth technology as a pervasive potential help. We're also here to discuss some of the challenges of designing effective technology. So older adults may find themselves in something of a dilemma. They're the typical patient in a complex healthcare system that requires self-management of their chronic illness. So there's an increased need to understand, remember, synthesize information to make decisions. At the same time, technology, which has a great potential to help them with this task, may not be designed in a way in terms of their needs and abilities and interests. So I like to think about this in terms of information being readily available to patients, older adults, but may not be cognitively accessible. So my colleagues and I have been taking a multidisciplinary approach to designing technology that sort of is at the intersection of behavioral social sciences, health sciences, and engineering sciences. And what I'm trying to convey in this figure is that these different theoretical perspectives only converge effectively if there's if the fabric kind of underlying it takes a systems view. So let me give you a particular flavor of this interdisciplinary approach that's centered on health literacy. So my colleagues and I kind of think about three different stages in terms of designing interventions generally to improve self-care for older adults. First, you have to identify relevant patient abilities, and then you have to analyze how those abilities influence processes related to self-care, comprehension, decision-making. And then those two steps inform interventions. So all of this only works if you have theories that inform each of these steps. So the first two steps, behavioral social sciences, are very important. And then as you move towards interventions, the engineering sciences becomes especially important. And then at the bottom, you see the health sciences is kind of undergirds all of this effort to create effective interventions. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the front end, the first two stages, and focus on health literacy. So here's a busy slide, my apologies. But essentially, you can think about self-care like taking medication as requiring some core health literacy functions related to comprehension, understanding the information you need, remembering it, thinking about the risk associated with the task. And then those steps or those functions in turn depend on broader resources, cognitive resources like processing capacity, working memory capacity. And we know that that declines with age in general, which constrains or can impair comprehension, those health literacy functions. At the same time, age is also related to an increase, often an increase, or at least a sustaining of knowledge about language, about healthcare, and affective and emotional self-regulation. So health literacy in part in our work is kind of all about the interplay between age-related constraints and processing capacity and age-related benefits related to knowledge and emotional regulation. As you move this approach closer to thinking about behavior, then you also have to think about how health literacy shapes attitudes and intentions to perform, say, medication, self-care behaviors. So just to give you a little flavor of this, I'll talk about results of one study that kind of consistent with the framework and moves us towards thinking about effective interventions. So in this study, we had older adults, had hypertension, came into our lab, and read passages about taking care of themselves, about hypertension self-care, and then they recalled the passages. The key finding kind of illustrates this trade-off between process capacity declines and knowledge gains. So essentially what you found was people who knew more about hypertension, better recalled the information, and it helped offset any changes in processing capacity. So this is consistent with the idea that learning about self-care may be limited by processing capacity constraints, but supported by knowledge. And it kind of moves us towards thinking about designing technology that reduces demands on processing capacity and leverages or builds on age-related strengths related to knowledge and affect. So how do we do that? Well, now I turn to a framework related to designing environmental supports for older adults that I've worked out with Wendy Rogers a few years ago. So you think about identifying tasks that need support in the first place. So for adherence, that's things like comprehension, planning, and then you start thinking about developing environmental supports that reduce demands in particular ways, reduce demands on their processing capacity, and then at the same time also supports their use of cognitive resources like knowledge. We've been doing this in the context of thinking about designing computer agents that might be a virtual provider in a variety of different contexts. So the example I'll give, it relates to patient portals and using agents within portals. So it's clear that portals have a great potential for providing instantaneous access to healthcare information and supporting continuity of healthcare. We also know that that information may not be easy to understand by everybody, but especially older adults. So one of the things that portals, a hazard of portals, is that it may reduce the face-to-face communication that help patients get the gist of the numbers that they need to help, like cholesterol numbers. So by gist, I mean some kind of a memory that's qualitative, like my HDL or my LDL is high and maybe increasing. It is also affectively organized, that this is a threat. So portals, on the one hand, can eliminate or reduce the face-to-face communication that providers use to support gist memory. And the portal itself may provide a minimal context for helping people make sense of those numbers. So what we're doing is leveraging what we know about graphics to make more salient gist-related features like comparison of numbers and changes across time, the use of verbal labels to label risk categories, and integrating that with a virtual provider who essentially in a portal context brings back some of the face-to-face interaction, if well designed. So what we've done is we've compared typical ways of presenting cholesterol information, this is the kind of thing I see in my portal, to a more enhanced kind of context where you take the same numbers, embed them in number lines that have color and facial expressions to convey the risk associated with these numbers, and a provider that brings in some of the high-level commentary and interaction that may especially help older adults understand the gist. So we started with an actual video of a provider talking about the meaning of these numbers for patients. We replaced that, or we moved on from a video to a photorealistic avatar based on that same person. This was the first version, not the best in the world, but we've gone on to look at different levels of realism, different kinds of computer agents. And so if we think about this from the environmental support framework, what we're trying to do is design providers that reduce task demands by enhancing task-relevant information, by using color, speech, by increasing processing opportunity. If you have a provider, a virtual provider that it can repeat and elaborate information without the constraints of an office visit. You can externalize the task using graphics and explicit speech to reduce the demands of comprehension on processing capacity. At the same time, you can use familiar concepts and other verbal-based, knowledge-based cues to affect. I will just tell you a little bit about what we found here, that basically either the video or the computer agent compared to the standard format tends to improve older adults' memory for the gist of diabetic and cholesterol test numbers, their affective response to the information, their risk perceptions more calibrated, that translates into behavioral intentions to do things like change their exercise. I suspect I'm running out of time. Okay, so I'll just very quickly go through some of the more recent iterations of this, where we're trying to integrate automated translation of medication information into an agent-based system that's interactive with patients to improve communication and education. And I will get to the bottom line. Hopefully illustrating interdisciplinary theory as the basis for designing more effective types of environmental support involving technology. Self-care can be supported by technology that leverages the cognitive strengths of patients and reduces demands on age-vulnerable resources. And that's illustrated in work on our collaborative patient portals using agent-based communication. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Great, okay, so we'll have our third 10 minutes, and then we'll be able to talk as a panel. So if you have questions, be saving them so that you can ask us as a group. So this is Michael Phillips. He's the Director of Technology Strategy Integration for AARP.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So I am extremely passionate about the acceleration of technology and innovation going forward across a lot of different sectors. The implication of exponential technology growth are enormous for our health, our mobility, our passions, and even the length of our lives. The collision of several technologies powered by exponential trends can disrupt the challenges facing older adults, and increasingly innovators can draw from emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, biometric sensors, blockchain, embedded voice, process automation, cloud democratization is a big one, and virtual reality to solve these health problems. It's the creative application of these multiple emerging technologies, or the collision of the tech buckets, as Susan called them, that are going to end up disrupting markets, which is really exciting. It's really an exciting time to be here. So someone asked about tech adoption in different generations. Tech adoption is high across all generations, even among our oldest populations. If you combine PCs and tablets and smartphones, everyone who's online, it's starting to approach 90% even for our oldest folks in our population. We have some pretty rich data about this, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. Just let me know that you're interested, and I'll send it your way. We're seeing, and I think we have new research that will be coming out over the next couple of months that I can also send along. But even beyond the normal types of technology, smart home speakers, I believe, are crossing the 10% threshold with the 50-plus population, and will be increasing at an exponential rate going forward as we embed voice in refrigerators and toaster ovens and crock pots. And we also are seeing virtual reality come on the scene. So I have data around that as well that I can share offline. What we see is innovators who are innovating on technology, who are riding the rails of technology that are already in people's homes, are going to have higher adoption rates. People who are innovating in platforms that are newer are going to have a slower adoption rate, but certainly will have an influence. And as mentioned earlier, our research shows that 90% of older adults want to age in their homes. So what I want to do is just mention 4 factors that impact their ability to live in their homes, and tell you about ways that AARP is investigating to help ease the buckets, and talk about each of the tech buckets for each one. So we've established already that social isolation in the elderly is high, and there's huge health risks associated with that. At AARP, we're attacking social isolation in several ways: awareness campaigns, partnerships, and using technology wherever possible. One pilot that was carried out earlier this year began right here in Baltimore at the Weinberg Place Senior Housing Community. We had 170 residents in 4 affordable housing complexes that were given Amazon Alexa smart speakers as part of the AARP Foundation's Social Connected Voice Activation Technology Program. The goal of the program is to test whether voice-activated technology can help older adults fight isolation and loneliness. Initial observations suggest that the program does have promise, and it will be extended into next year for more information. Participants were provided relevant daily information in the form of flash briefings. Alexa also allowed users to use their device for community activities calendars, hear the news, listen to their favorite music, set reminders to take medicine. And one of the most commonly heard phrases in the pilot, interestingly, was, "Alexa, tell me a joke." So the challenges have also been real. A lot of residents had minimal experience with smartphones and wireless internet, and were somewhat resistant. There was a lot of fears about that somebody is listening to all of their conversations. So but we have received positive response, and we'll continue the program into next year, and we'll hopefully have some results that we can share. Aging in place often requires a team of family caregivers and medical professionals, and is most effective when health, social, financial, housing, and technology resources are all well coordinated. We're investigating a number of innovations to ease the burdens on family caregivers across AARP. I want to talk about 3 partnerships in the virtual reality space that we're working on. First is Embodied Labs was recently a winner in our nationwide innovation pitch competition. They're creating amazing training experiences for caregivers. They build authentic, meaningful virtual reality narratives powered by experiential learning. Embodied Labs combines filmmaking, software development, educational design, and empathy training. They put caregivers and nurses in a first-person experience as a dementia or Alzheimer's patient in virtual reality, and then through the experiences that they see, they can learn how to deal with different situations. They'll also be expanding past dementia and Alzheimer's in future releases now that they've received more funding. Rendeavor is another company that we're partnering with to bring VR travel and learning experiences to people with mobility challenges. Imagine touring Jerusalem, or scuba diving in the Caribbean, or watching the aurora borealis at sunset, even as a homebound patient. And lastly, VR Health is creating a suite of home health apps on the Oculus VR platform. It's our jointly run focus groups, where this picture was taken. We're learning that many older adults are not even aware that VR technology exists, or how to use it, or how to buy it, or how to set it up. And once they experience it, and with a little bit of coaching, they want one for their homes. This is a particular passion of mine. That coaching, I think, is going to be critical as health technology becomes more prevalent. So we're looking at how we can scale that up across our organization to bring awareness to these types of products. Having disability and chronic conditions can make it difficult for older adults to complete daily activities like bathing, dressing, shopping, and cooking. We're monitoring robotics and AI offerings that show promise in the future. We receive a whole lot of questions from our members about robots. I'm really looking forward to the day that I can recommend a cost-effective assistant to help out with daily tasks around the house. That's going to be an exciting day. In the meantime, AARP is partnered with Best Buy to provide smart home technology. We've designed it and are helping with some of the focus testing and actually provided a member discount for such, oops, I'm in the wrong slide here, huh? I'm sorry. For such, for video doorbells, smart locks, smart thermostats, smart lighting, all with voice assistant and mobile app technology. I don't want to sugarcoat smart home technology. It's complex to install quite often, and if you have access to an expert or a grandson, it makes it a lot easier, but not everybody has that access, and it's expensive. So those who are low income, really, it's not a viable solution at this time. And then connected health, I just want to talk about this. This is really exciting. We're using our research, our prototyping lab on campus at the University of Illinois to investigate what would it be like if we combined, if we had the collision between telehealth sessions with AI-enabled biometrics. How might a patient in the future experience biometric monitoring of blood pressure, cardiac events, physical activity, body mass, sleep, blood glucose levels, and then potentially be connected to a medical professional if a problem was detected. We're building a prototype on the HoloLens augmented reality platform that you see here, and we've realized that one of the big advantages that it has, that we see, is data visualization being shared between the patient who has the augmented reality smart glasses and a medical professional who's a telehealth professional, to be able to view and discuss that biometric data in real time is powerful. The potential is great, but there's plenty of policy and technical hurdles that stand in the way currently. Our hope is that building a prototype for the future, we can get policymakers engaged in creating policy today that will enable the technology of the future, rather than our current cycle, which is wait till the technology comes out and then try to fix the policy problems around it. So the last thing I want to talk about real quickly is the digital divide, the new digital divide that's forthcoming. 5 years ago, the term digital divide was often used to describe those who still didn't have access to broadband internet. A new digital divide is increasingly relevant as new emerging tech solutions are available to solve health problems for only some of us. As exponential change accelerates, there will be increasingly the haves and the have-nots. We are tracking 6 different factors that are creating the divide. In an era where the cost of technology should be dropping, we're seeing deliberate efforts in leading tech companies to drive up the costs. The price of components are falling, yet the cost of devices are rising. Complexity is another factor. Where we see plug-and-play technology, we see greater adoption across all generations. But when designers complicate the setup process and make usability more difficult, it limits tech solutions for generations that have not grown up familiar with technology. Everyone loves simple interfaces. There was a question here a little while ago about what makes it better what's different for different generations. And the design and complexity is certainly different for different generations. Digital natives, if anybody's used the app Snapchat, then you see this in action. As a Gen X technologist, I feel pretty comfortable with all technology, but it's clear that Snapchat was not made for my generation or anybody above my generation on purpose, based on the interface, on the complexity of the interface. So we need designers to design across the board. Awareness is a real challenge for all of us. It's hard to keep up. We increasingly have the problem of change. It's hard to keep up with new tech solutions that are worthy within the flood of new products that are hitting the market every day. Another factor is connectedness. I think someone mentioned this a little while ago, that those who have community, whether it's family or caregivers or even an online community, it's more likely to hear about technology and find solutions to overcome the obstacles. But more isolated individuals run the risk of missing out on technology that can be helpful to their lives. Dialect that is unique in diverse communities and generations is increasingly becoming a blocker as voice-embedded technology becomes more prevalent. And finally, distrust. Privacy concerns are real, and unfortunately, we all have to give up data about ourselves in order to reap the benefits of some technology. It's almost impossible for us to know what data is being collected on us and how it's going to be used. So people who are distrustful will have limited access to enabling technology. This is a real problem. So in closing, in line with our social mission, AARP is disrupting the conversation around aging to bring technology-enabled innovation to market. Innovators like you guys in this room, I was really impressed, policymakers and the medical community all must come together to collaborate and address those factors that lead to the digital divide of tech haves and have-nots, and jointly explore emerging technologies that have the promise to help augment the way we function, to make our lives healthier, faster, sharper, more mobile, and empower the way we choose to live as we all age, to your point. Thank you.
Great, so, we're in the order that we started. Great, so we've got time for questions and discussion and aha moments and things you wish we talked about, or so anyone want to kick us off? There's 2 microphones, and there's also microphones that can be handed around. Dr. Lehman.
One thing that's interesting is the other divide, and thank you for these comments, between what we teach medical students and the reality of the world out there. I don't think the Hopkins, most medical schools do not teach how to be a doctor in this world, and a lot of what you were showing had nothing to do with doctors. Good, it's not a bad thing, but can you say something a little bit about how not only is the technology advancing, but the medical schools can't keep up, the faculty can't keep up, and how we're going to, beyond assuming that young people are digital natives and they understand stuff, which they do not, how do we fix that?
Do you want to
No, go
go?
ahead.
Me too? Okay. Well, I think we're entering a period where it's not on.
Oh, that's for the live.
Oh, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so we'll just yell.
The other things are for the 2 that are on the podium, the 2 little boxes.
Okay, I'm not sure we're using it correctly, but I think that we're entering a period where we're really talking about healthcare teams, and that doctor won't necessarily be expected to train everyone about everything in terms of their lives, and that maybe we'll have community health workers who are specifically more about technology, or I'm just making this up, but I don't think that every healthcare provider needs to have every skill for every patient, and that as we have more and more patient-centered medical homes, that will be more of the model. But feel free to argue, anyone in the audience, or add.
Do I just speak into this?
We don't know.
Okay.
It's just,
Okay, perfect.
okay.
Plug and play.
You know, at AARP, we're of course more focused on the individual in the home than the medical community, but we're really tracking on how can caregivers be enabled more to fill the white space, and how can telehealth fill some of the gaps also, because we're tracking that there's not going to be enough medical professionals to handle the load in the future, and we're going to have to rely on technology augmentation or telehealth or caregivers in other areas to fill some of that white space.
Yeah.
Dan, would you please elaborate more on how you got to working on the self-help aspect of what you're doing using technology? I think that's fantastic. You know, I'd really like to know more.
So why I gravitated towards technology?
Well, the self-help.
Why self-management?
Oh, why self-management?
Yeah.
I think because the problem is so huge that self-managing chronic illness is something like 75–80% of healthcare costs. So I think the problem is very compelling to work on, and it meshes well with my background, my training in cognition, and how self-care it really is a complicated, multifaceted task, and people have to engage in a lot of intensive understanding and synthesis and evaluation. And it used to be more, it was more handing off insights and suggestions from physicians or providers. And I think more and more it's a partnership that may be more patient, not just patient-centered, but there's just more requirement from patients. So I find that there's a good fit between theories of health literacy from a cognitive perspective and thinking about ways to help older adults with that cognitively complex task. It doesn't have to be by any stretch technology. It can be just simplifying instructions, medication instructions. In fact, that's maybe more powerful.
Thank you, experts for presentations. So we are glad to help, and we do believe in the impact of interdisciplinary collaboration with engineering, nurses, medicine, etc., and technology innovation from mobile cell phone application to virtual reality. To help older adults to gain a better health and well-being. So I was just wondering, from the perspective of global health and health inequality, how could older adults from resource-limited regions or low-income countries benefit from this globalization force to have bigger health and well-being?
Do you want to address that, since I know it's the AARP, but you talked about the digital divide? Do you want to talk about the question of how do we not exacerbate the digital divide even more in terms of global health?
Yeah, no, I think it's really relevant. We're very focused here on the United States, but more and more we're trying to partner with other organizations, like-minded organizations around the world. And the great thing is, everything is so globalized. You know, there's not a lot of barriers. When we have innovations in one part of the world, it's pretty quick to spread to other areas and other geographies, which is a great thing. So I think it's really a great point that we have to be encouraging each other across the different innovation groups across the globe. But it's certainly other areas of the world face even bigger obstacles than we face here sometimes. But in other ways, other areas have leapfrogged the United States in some areas of technology. I think of mobile connectedness as being one of those.
Krishna Swadesh, Ministry of Great panel. This question is for Michael. I was really intrigued by seeing how the old adults are adopting to technologies like VR. And my question is, if VR has other problems like people feel sickness and issues like that. So in your studies, have you seen older adults adopting to VR naturally, or do you look at other issues that might be involved into that community?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have done all of our testing with virtual reality in a seated position with arm rails and a swivel chair, because like you said, there's some dangers that could be in tripping, and dizziness is definitely a factor. Now, I have heard this, and I don't know if it's true, but there's some osteoporosis that happens in the bones in the ear that may contribute to older generations having even more dizziness than other generations. I'm not sure about that. In our testing, almost everybody can go 15 or 20 minutes in virtual reality and without any problem. But then people do get dizzy depending on the activity. So some of the physical therapy activities that we've worked on, like using neck motions and back motions for in-home physical therapy, we've worked really hard to there not being a lot of movement going on in the design. It's very stagnant.
It's something that all of us should look more into, especially dance interested in factors in technology.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the speakers for the thought presentations. I just wanted to point out a comment that I had during Morrow's presentation.
Can you talk just a little louder?
I wanted to point out,
Thanks.
I guess, let me turn it this way. since
Okay.
it's close to me. I wanted to point out an aha moment from Dr. Morrow's presentation. And I think that similar to the way environmental design for people with disabilities has benefited people without disabilities more, such as curb cuts and adaptive handles. I think that the synthesis of data and the use of graphical presentation of data, it can be equally helpful for caregivers and health practitioners as it is for the older person with health needs.
I totally agree. I think the attempt is to try to make the presentation more engaging and easier to understand for everybody.
That's great, thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Hi.
you so much to the panel for the wonderful presentations. My question is regarding for the whole panel, and how have you navigated safety issues or even regulation issues of tech? So my concern is with the increased risk of like harm if tech is misused, or perhaps like Mr. Phillips was saying, if they're using these, the Oculus Rift, at home, and perhaps they're not seated, or even the increased risk for privacy violations with more information that's being collected with apps or these different new technologies that are emerging. So I guess I'm curious, how do you navigate these safety issues and ensure that violations of privacy are happening or they're not risk falls from misuse of technology?
Yeah, I can speak from our community. So we're approached on a pretty regular basis by people who are creating various technologies who want to try them out and let's see what happens. So we're, again, kind of starting from behind, kind of trying to work on that game. We're also a HIPAA-covered entity. So we have strict guidelines on this information, what we can share, what we can't share, and how we go about that. So we are working to run all these testings through a research board, and we need to submit it to the institutional research board. We write up strict protocols on where everything is, how it's being stored, how it's being used, which does turn away a lot of people, unfortunately, that if their technology is not HIPAA approved, then we can't work with that. We could work in other ways, maybe looking at feasibility, maybe running something through the Bureau of SAGES to get just kind of input on the technology as opposed to on the health or other outcomes that they're looking at.
I can tell you, our legal team gets very nervous every time we start doing these types of initiatives because, to your point, it's risky. The data privacy types of concerns that are available. I mentioned the project here in Baltimore where we're using Alexa. We don't think anything bad can happen with that level of data, but who really knows what's behind the black curtain sometimes? And lawyers get really nervous, and tech companies are very, very rigid about releasing too much information. So there is some risk involved, unfortunately. We would love to see our consumer advocacy area of our policy group is pushing for more openness and transparency. But unless there's, we'll see how the new administration changes. But we haven't had much luck lately. As far as scams, AARP has launched a big scam awareness initiative over the last 3 years called Fraud Watch to help train and bring awareness. And it actually surpassed, in our research on why do you want to be an AARP member, it surpassed discounts as being the number one benefit from being an AARP member. So there's a lot of hunger out there for that information.
Well, and just to add, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that the people who do scams are very up on the science in terms of what you do is you first heighten someone's emotions, right? You either make them nervous, something bad's going to happen to them, or they've just won the lottery, and that the enhanced tech can make that even stronger, right? You can feel like you're somewhere, or you feel like you've seen your granddaughter, and so we'll have to be even all the more careful as we move forward. As things get techier, the scam potential is even more.
That's right.
Just in terms of information security, I'll just say I don't have any solutions. Our team is kind of moving towards those issues because we would ideally like to have an agent-based app that interacts with the patient portal, so that brings up issues of HIPAA compliance and security of information, which we haven't addressed yet.
Great question.
It's a big
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
So thanks, great panel. A really important point about using design and technology to foster empowerment and person-centeredness. Just as a factoid, by 2044, we become a minority-majority country. So we're much more diverse ethnically, racially, culturally. And so as we design things, I was thinking about your avatars. How will you be able to have avatars that relate ethnically, culturally, value-based to the person on the other side? Because I think that's a big part of what makes people want to engage, to learn, and to develop that sense of capacity.
Right. I think that's part of the attractiveness of the avatar agent technology is that it facilitates tailoring of communication to a wide range of people. And there's a lot of work that's looking at that. Just having a sense of control of choosing the avatar you want to interact with in itself may have benefits, cognitive benefits.
Like in Monopoly, I was always the car, right? So vote. Yeah.
Hi, thanks again, John Gersh, PPO. Comment and a question. Comment for Michael Phillips. The last thing on your digital divide list was distrust, but you characterized it as people who are distrustful will have access, as opposed to saying, from the other direction, systems which are not transparently trustworthy cannot be effective.
It's important.
That's an interesting question. Unfortunately, right now we're in a position where where the patient or the customer, because this is outside of even health applications, the customer doesn't have the power to say I don't want to give up my privacy. The tech companies and people who are designing have all the power. Either you use our product like it is and you give up your data, or you don't. So if you're distrustful, you don't get to use that product. But your point's a really, really good one that we're hoping policymakers will start to understand.
Well, and the technologists as well, in terms of explainable, understandable systems.
Yeah, yeah.
Question for Amy Eisenstein. Bureau of Sages is such a really cool name. For lots of reasons, and I'm wondering how you came up with it.
No rhyme or reason, really. They're an advisory board. I see them as sages. A lot of people say that's kind of corny, but it actually, the name really also enticed a lot of people to participate, which was great. They, going back, we did some interviews, why are you working with us? And they said, well, when you started, I had no idea what this was about, but I wanted to be a sage. So,
It's a translation of Sanhedrin.
a what?
The Sanhedrin was the council of sages back in Mishnah Echad. So it fits with the Bureau of Jewish
Mhm.
Yeah, I had one other point that I wanted to bring up from earlier, just this conversation about physicians and their role with technology and educating physicians. One of the things that our community members deal with a lot is all of this information now available online about various health outcomes, medication, and a lot of discussion around shared decision making. And, in so many other professions where the expert works through shared decision making with the clients, that doesn't happen as much in healthcare. And the question, are we moving to an opportunity where there is more shared decision making, where some of the patients are more knowledgeable on the healthcare process, and not that they're the experts, but when does that kind of transition to help that discussion of what are our important health outcomes, and how are we going to aid in that decision-making process?
Okay.
Yes, thank you all for your great presentations. I very much appreciated the patient-centered focus. We did just come back, some of us, from the gerontological meetings, and Mary Tinetti gave a wonderful talk on patient-centered management of care for older adults. And she made the very strong point that often, older adults don't want their diseases better managed. They want other things. So there was a great example of a woman who wanted to be able to walk her dog and to talk to her neighbors, but her medications were making her too dizzy to do that. And so a two-part question would be, what are your plans for eliciting older adults' preferences with respect to the non-purely medical aspects of their care? And then how might technology actually be able to help patients and providers navigate that more complicated landscape? Thank you.
I'll start. So my whole program research is in eliciting older adults' functional goals, and then providing nursing and occupational therapy and home modification to enable those. And it turns out that for clinicians, you really have to retrain them to listen in such a way that you're using your expertise as a clinician and your pattern recognition and what you've seen work before, but you're treating the older adult as an expert in their life and their goals and their needs, so that it's much more, we each bring something to the table. And I think that to spread our program, we've had to develop trainings that are very interactive, that we're hoping to work into other clinician training as well, for exactly your reason, is that it's not just goals in a palliative care kind of sense. It's what you were saying, Dr. Tinetti was saying about wanting to be able to walk her dog or wanting to be able to talk to her neighbor. And these are things we take for granted when we're younger, and that clinicians really do have a role as someone comes to for expertise and comes often routinely. So I think that there's a lot of excellent work in that area, including hers, and it needs to be incorporated into the technology, which can enhance that in terms of the assessment. People could maybe imagine different things they could do and see that enacted, or there's a lot of ways in which I think that technology can be supported, but at the basis of it is a conversation. Go ahead.
We did a lot of our work. We're very focused on, well, first getting into patient-reported outcomes, but then transitioning to patient-centered outcomes. So not only patient-reported, but are they relevant to the patient? And how do you take those outcomes then when speaking to the medical field to quantify them and to be able to have standardized and individualized patient-centered outcomes? So we do a lot of work around understanding some of those subjective concepts that are more relevant to our patients, and then looking at how our interventions and our care really relate to those. So when we do any sort of quality improvement, work, we really want to make sure that we are coming up with some way, and usually we use a lot of technology to, computer adaptive testing or something for assessment, so we can understand how that is impacting our clients through that patient-centered outcome approach.
I've come across a few studies, kind of exploratory proof of concept studies showing that computer-based agents can help patients come to sort of shared decision-making, going through values clarification and kind of taking a theory of shared decision-making, implementing it into the agent in terms of a conversation, and helping patients come to some kind of a shared decision. I don't know if I am terribly optimistic at that. I like the idea that things like agents or other forms of technology can educate patients about their options and collect data from patients about their options or their values, and then prime the interaction with a provider, so that clearly everybody knows there's not a lot of time for ideal shared decision making, but maybe technology can help provide an enhanced context for that.
Great, thank you. We've got a few more minutes, and so I think we'll take these 3 questions, and then we'll take our break.
Thank you for that. Really enjoyed it. As someone who's deeply embedded in the challenges of privacy and security, for anyone in the room that's building engineering solutions, I strongly recommend that you look up a woman by the name of Dr. Anne Kalukian. She was a privacy commissioner for Canada. And I am getting deeper and deeper into this concept of privacy by design. And I would suggest that anybody that's involved in dealing with private information, PII, or even healthcare, private health information, PHI as they call it. Because you want to build that in from the beginning. You don't want to do it after the fact. You want it to be embedded. You want it to be user-centric. You want it to be fully transparent. And I always like to say that if you build the privacy in, you sort of get the security on the flip side of that coin. So I would recommend people look into privacy by design as a concept.
Thank you.
Solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, again, just echo what everyone else has said. This has been a very, very interesting morning. One thing I noticed, old people have physical deterioration as well as cognitive and social isolation. Overwhelmingly, this panel has used tech to mean the same thing the news does, applications running kind of network-enabled or virtual reality, a lot of things as computer scientists will do. There are also, aside from banisters on the stair rail, it would be very interesting to hear, do you folks have thoughts on how to deal with some of the physical challenges that older people have, even in their homes, in their daily life?
Yeah, how long do you have?
Well, maybe
we might have to
another
catch up
3
later.
hours.
Right.
But there is this tendency, I think, sometimes that we focus on internet-enabled applications, actually because they're easy and relatively low cost to do, and it's sexy and fun. But I think it would be interesting to look at the whole picture and hear what you have to say about that.
I want to throw in, that there are, especially in our communities, we look to a variety of different technological supports, and there are a ton, and I might not be the best person to speak to all of them, but I was recently talking with some of our residents. We did a photo voice project where we asked them to take pictures of things that were meaningful to their own quality of life. And we had several of our residents take pictures of the various equipment that's used to help them maintain their independence. And I saw those pictures and I'm kind of cringing, wow, this is tough, this is hard stuff. And the idea with photo voice is then you have a conversation with them about what does this photo mean to you. The responses were so optimistic. This one lady says, oh, you see that piece of equipment? I call that my lifesaver. Mm-hmm. That's what enables me to do what I need to do every day. And so just no matter what the equipment was, there were several pictures of that type of equipment that were spoken about so positively.
I'll just briefly say that, so physical ability is a combination of the person and the environment they're in. And people talk about a person-environment fit, right? So ideally, you work at it from both sides in terms of their own pain, their own dizziness, their own strength, and then also environmental modifications or repairs or everyday items or devices. So, I mean, the combinations are, you know, infinite just about, but it starts with an elicitation of people's goals and what they want to be able to do, and then it moves on to what should we do for you intrinsically and what should we do for the environment, and then, of course, how that's done and how it's paid for, I guess would be the short answer. But I'd be happy to follow up and send you papers. Yeah, last question before we have a well-deserved break.
With regards to the discussion of concerns about privacy, security, and the balance of power between users and providers of technology, do you think open source software and hardware would provide a possible solution to these concerns?
I think so. I think that now that there's GitHub and other open source solutions where and the cloud is such a cheap source of storing and distributing data and information, it's going to have a huge democratization effect on innovation over the next decade. So yeah, I think so. I think to some of the points that have come up, I think that now anybody can create applications that have new creative ways to solve problems, but it just creates more challenges when that happens. Not to say that innovation through open source technology and cloud is a bad thing, but it just raises more. We have to really pay attention to the guardrails a little bit more clearly as anybody in their garage has access to such powerful tools, and as machine learning and AI becomes part of that toolbox in a more effective, more interesting way. Yeah, there's a lot of problems I think that could be solved. I think that's a really great point. And to the gentleman just before, I'm not an expert on in-home design, although I read a lot of our material, but right now there's such a acceleration happening in the world of open source software, machine learning, and cloud enablement, and I think that's driving a lot of the apps and other types of solutions that are flooding the market and will continue to flood the market.
All right, well, thanks to everyone.
All right, thank you. Thank you again for a great panel. We have a break now until 11 o'clock, but I'll point out there are these very white boards over there waiting for your notes. It's been a really interactive discussion. I hope you captured some ideas and that you'll put them up on the board or tweet them so that we can capture them. Thank you all. See you back at 11 o'clock.